Imagine waking up tomorrow to a world where no one speaks. Not because of a law or a disease, but because people simply stop. Conversations end. Phone calls disappear. Strangers no longer exchange greetings. Friends sit in silence. Families eat without a word. It sounds like science fiction, but it is a thought experiment worth taking seriously, because in many ways, we are already halfway there. To understand what would be lost, you have to look at what happens to the human animal when its most vital function is stripped away. First, there would be the internal collapse. Language is not just a tool for sharing information. It is the architecture of human thought. When you put an idea into words, you refine it. You discover gaps in your own reasoning. Without conversation, thought becomes circular. It stays trapped in a head, never tested against another perspective, never sharpened by disagreement. A person who stops talking does not just stop communicating. They stop thinking clearly. Psychology and neuroscience confirm that social connection is a biological necessity, not a preference. Chronic isolation is toxic to the body. It raises stress hormones, weakens the immune system, and increases the risk of heart disease and dementia. Furthermore, conversation is our primary mechanism for emotional regulation. Neuroscience shows that putting emotions into words activates the prefrontal cortex and dampens the amygdala, the brain's fear center. Talking literally calms the nervous system. Without it, emotions remain raw, unprocessed, and overwhelming. A world without conversation would be a world of people carrying unregulated emotional loads, increasingly volatile and increasingly fragile. Then there would be the societal collapse. Trust is the foundation of every functioning civilization, and trust is built through talk. You learn to trust someone by hearing their voice, reading their face, and catching the micro-expressions that reveal true intent. Text strips these signals away. A world that stops talking and starts only typing would see trust erode. Misunderstanding would multiply. Cooperation would collapse. Creativity and innovation would suffer catastrophically. Breakthrough ideas rarely emerge in isolation. They arise from collision, from the unexpected combination of perspectives that happens when different minds meet, argue, and build on each other's thoughts. The history of science, art, and business is a history of conversation. Remove the dialogue, and you remove the engine of progress. A silent humanity would stagnate, each person trapped in their own limited mental world. Finally, there would be the generational collapse. Children would be the most devastating casualties. Language acquisition requires active, back-and-forth interaction. A child who hears language but never engages in dialogue does not develop normal linguistic competence. The critical windows for social and cognitive development would close. Without conversation, children would fail to learn empathy, because empathy is practiced in the give and take of dialogue. They would fail to learn negotiation, because negotiation requires real-time adaptation. They would grow up intellectually and emotionally stunted, unable to form the bonds that make life meaningful. The human brain contains mirror neurons that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe another person performing it. These neurons are the biological basis of empathy. They are activated most powerfully in live, in-person interaction. A world without conversation would mean these neural circuits atrophy. We would become, in a literal neurological sense, less capable of relating to our own species. But here is the most terrifying insight from this thought experiment. We do not need to imagine a world where humans stop talking, because we are already building one. Not through catastrophe, but through convenience. People text instead of calling. They scroll instead of speaking. They sit in the same room, each in their own digital bubble, physically present but socially absent. The silence is not total, but it is growing. The cost is not immediate, but it is accumulating. Depression and anxiety are already rising in societies where conversation is being replaced by digital interaction. The science is clear. The psychology is clear. Human beings are not designed for isolation. We are designed for dialogue, for the messy, beautiful, essential work of turning thoughts into words and sending them across the space between one mind and another. That space is where civilization lives. It is where love lives. It is where meaning lives. If humans stopped talking to each other, the species would not end in a day. It would end slowly, in the erosion of trust, the collapse of health, the drying up of creativity, and the quiet despair of minds that were built for connection and left to function alone. This thought experiment is a warning, not a prediction. The conversation is still available. The voice is still yours to use. The question is whether you will use it before the silence becomes too comfortable to break.